I stopped on page 68 the last time. So I want to take it from page, continue from page 68 moving forward, right? We have to read this book, particularly now with what everything that is happening in Sierra Leone. This book that was written by Dr. Abass Bundu since 2000 is magnificent. It is actually giving us everything, that happened, back then. So it's very crucial. It's very important that we read. As Sierra Leoneans, I know, I was one of them too. We don't read as much. So the history of Sierra Leone is buried so much. That is why we're not able to look back and see retrospectively what has gone wrong so we can fix them moving forward, right? That is the fundamental problem that we have. And that has to change. So that is my responsibility and that is your responsibility. That is our responsibility. That is why I continue to do this civic education, because for me it's all about civic education. That's the goal. That is the plan. So I'm going to continue reading this book again from page 68 of Dr. Abass Bundu, who is currently the Speaker of Parliament in Sierra Leone. He knows everything that happened back then, all the way going back to the 1960s, pre-independence, post-independence, 1960s, right? He knows the history of Sierra Leone. So for him to sit in a parliament today, that is the worst parliament Sierra Leone has ever had, is going to go down in the books of history as the most decrepit, the most useless, futile, and just just nasty parliament. I'm sorry, I'm going to use that word. It's the fast season and all of that, but it's just what it is. These guys have written all kinds of terrible, bad laws and political, party elections laws that are very terrible. PPRC and everything they did. I mean, parliament. It's just the cybercrime laws that were passed, how they used it against citizens, the killing of our people, all of that. This parliament superintended over that, and we have people like Honorable Abu Kagos now, who is currently the leader of the opposition in parliament, and it seems to me like he's bound to go and crash as well. He's on the track. He's on the trajectory to just crash, worse than even Cherikoko, Honorable Cherno Majuba, who was the leader of the opposition in parliament since 2018 to date, to last year, where we're still dealing with the June 24th, 2023 elections anyway. So that is a conversation for another day. But what I want to do is let me start reading this book. Pay attention. Again, if you go through my YouTube page, you go into the live section, you will see, since I started reading this book, so you can catch up and follow. If you're just joining me, just stay with me and see where I'm going. It's page 68, but I've been doing these lives, so we have to read this book. It's very important because people like Dr. Abass Bundu needs to know that we know that what they've been doing to Sierra Leone is wrong. And people like Abass Bundu, who is in his 80s, is going to pass away, in the next few years. I'm not God. I'm not calling that on him. But with age, we know that is a propensity that he could die any day. I'm not wishing that on him. I want him to live for 100 years. But people like them making these decisions for generations yet unborn, that are going to be affected when he is gone. Because, hey, who am I, right? Never know. Everybody's life is in God's hand. We never know what destiny is. But a 40-year-old person and an 80-year-old somebody, I mean, who's more prone to that? So looking at Abass Bundu's role in a democracy today, it's very sad that as old as he is, with great, great, great grandkids, I'm sure, and he's doing what he's doing to our democracy, sitting and superintending in a parliament that has actually caused the destruction of our democracy. I think it's a shame, and we have to call him out on that. Okay, so let me read this book for you guys. Let me continue reading this book, and we'll take it from there. So stay with me, guys. Stay with me, everybody. All right. So I'm gonna start from a lot right here. I'm gonna start from a lot. You guys can see that, eh? All right. A lot has been said and written about the democratic nature of the Kaba government. It is true that elections were held, but the time has come for the truth about those sham elections to be laid bare. All right, guys. Let me know if sound is good and everything. I see I have one thumbs up. Just let me know if sound is good before I proceed. But I think sound looks okay on my check here. Looking at my system here. I think sound is good. And I guess I'll proceed, right? I'll proceed. Let's proceed, guys. Okay, again, a lot has been said and written about the democratic nature of the Kaba government. It is true that elections were held, but the time has come for the truth about those sham elections to be laid bare. It should be known, as we do trust that it will never recur, that elements of the Sierra Leone Army, on the instruction of the National Provisional Ruling Council, NPRC leadership, and you guys all know, you guys all remember, that was Marabio in charge at the time. Yes, Marabio was well, he's not a president right now, but who was the president 2018 to 2023 on June 24th, right? I mean, he actually ceased to be president in April of last year. So, but it's the same Marabio we're talking about, who was the leader of the NPRC because at that time, he had already overthrown Strasser. You guys know that. Again. And let me go back to the top here. As we do trust that it will never recur, that elements of the Sierra Leone Army, on the instructions of the National Provisional Ruling Council, NPRC leadership, and with the tacit connivance of INEC, which was ECS and NEC, then becomes, they changed it to ECSL because they were trying to wash the reputation. But anyways, guys, I'm going to read that way. I don't do too much of analysis because then it takes away, from the reading. So I'm just going to read, okay? All right. It's hard, believe me. It's really hard not to analyze things when I'm reading this book because there's so much playing in my head. But let me, at least for the sake of it, just read. All right? Okay. So, members of the NPRC leadership and with the tacit connivance of INEC were instrumental in causing the elections to be won by the SLPP candidate, Alhaji Hamad Tijan Kaba. In parts of the southern and eastern provinces, the collaborators in this anti-democratic conspiracy were so overzealous. The collaborators in this anti-democratic conspiracy were so overzealous that their operation resulted in a totality of votes cast in those areas being far in excess of the total number of registered voters. When this was brought to the attention of Chairman INEC, the chairman of INEC, Dr. James Jonah, his disingenuous response was unilaterally to penalize Tijan Kaba by reducing the votes cast in the relevant areas to equal 100% of the registered electors. Thus, as Sierra Leone being saddled with the undemocratic Kaba government, it is in the same light that the appointment of James Jonah as Sierra Leone's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations is to be seen. Again, let me read that area so you guys can catch that. Thus, has Sierra Leone been saddled with the undemocratic Kaba government, it is in the same light that the appointment of James Jonah as Sierra Leone's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations is to be seen as his reward for a fixing job well done. So James Jonah was appointed as the ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations by Kaba, again, because people see it as it was paying him for the job that he did with INEC to rig the elections alongside with Marabio. I played a video for you guys in the last live where Marabio stated very clearly that he wore kind of green and he knew where he was for the SLPP to win the elections. They didn't just win. That was Marabio's word. That's a crime in itself. And I don't see why the opposition leaders are not even taking up these issues, right? All right. As a reward for a fixing job well done. James Jonah's hysterical ravings and ranting following an intervention must be seen in a similar light. Whatever view one takes of this confession, its evidential value is undeniable. It lies in the fact that it is a voluntary confession by the military itself that some of its own members had been guilty of vote rigging in favor of President Kaba. This alone is enough to cast a shadow over the fairness of the 1996 elections. So the less said about those elections as the foundation of legitimacy for the SLPP government, the better. The only reason for the opposition not subjecting the INEC decision to judicial challenge was that, had it done so and succeeded, it would have meant holding fresh elections. The likelihood then was that the NPRC junta would have contrived every possible excuse, including the lash of financial penury, to delay holding fresh elections. And the longer they delayed the election, they would have remained in office. Who was in charge at the time? Marabio. So the only reason why the opposition, Dr. John Khalifa Smart, UNPP, that actually won the 1996 elections, the only reason why it did not go to court is for the fear. It was fearful of the fact that if they called for rerun elections, then this Marabio, the junta at the time, would hold on to power for as long as they could to drag the whole thing. That was why they did not go to the courts to settle the dispute of the elections results of 1996. Pay attention, what is happening right now, right? But we have a tripartite committee now, right? We're waiting on the tripartite committee to give us one of two things. Either give us the results of the June 24th, 2023 elections, or call for rerun elections. We need that. The votes of the people should never be messed with. That is what democracy is all about. It's about fighting to protect democratic rights. Sovereignty belongs to the people. The government, through the Constitution, derives its legitimacy, its authority, and its power from the people. That is Section 5, subsection 2 of the Constitution. Go read your Constitution. Let's continue. The 1996 irregularities also point to a dark cloud hovering over the next election if its supervision were to be left in hands other than those of an independent and impartial international arbiter. For the true test of the democratic process is not so much the organization and conduct of the first election as whether that first election would be followed by others consistent with democratic values and established electoral laws. African electoral experience is replete with incidents of this sort. They all point to the fact that the real problem is not with the electorate, but rather with incumbent political leadership. Their intolerance of dissent has made democratic transition an especially stressful exercise in many African countries. Sierra Leone is no exception. Almost every coup d'etat in that country has had roots either in electoral fraud or in the unwillingness of the incumbent to accept defeat and give up power. That is the end of chapter 1, by the way, guys. You see? The same thing we are going through right now in Sierra Leone, guys. It is no different. It is the same. African people, Sierra Leoneans, were determined. Let's talk Creole to some Salon people. Salon people will be so determined for vote. We even see them during the registration process when these guys disenfranchised citizens from properly registering. We saw for the very first time in the history of Sierra Leone where the registration process was split into two. 15 days here, 15 days there. Honorable Chairo Majubas, the leader of the opposition, was dancing with SLPP and the ECSL when they announced and launched the registration process for 15 days. Even then, in 1996, people had 30 days. And remember, in 1996, the rebel war was still going on, which was why we used the proportional representation system because, again, some of the areas were not accessible because the rebels were taken over some of their parts of the country. So it's the same thing that is happening today. But we have no reason to have, a proportional representation system at this time. But for the very first time, Honorable Chaino Majuba watched the SLPP and ECSL conduct a registration that was 15 days, when it should be concurrently at the same time, all across the country, if not 30 days, just like how we had over 45 days for 2018 elections. Continuously across the country, simultaneously, every area should be registering. And again, I don't even see why registration will be 30 days, 40 days. Registration should be an ongoing exercise every day. But that's a question for another day. It's just how useless we are as a democracy. The leaders are just useless because not only people are useless. Bunch of leaders from all sides of the aisle, APC, SLPP, just all useless. They've never been able to come for all, build with democracy. Let reach side for rich like the Americas and Europe. And all these other countries, when they run, they can't thief the money and count them. But this is the problem that we have. So the people of Sierra Leone never had an issue. The people of Sierra Leone are so educated, especially since 2018. And thanks to some of us that have been on social media that have been very, very adamant about teaching civic education. You know, myself, Cash Box, you know, Conrad Koita, the Lioness of the North, a lot of our brothers, some of them, you know, sisters, they're there in these quiet forums. But they've been doing a phenomenal work teaching, standing by the side of the people, not to for deceive the people or lie to the people. And over the past few months, for you guys that are following, you know, WhatsApp, audio messages, you've seen a lot of our brothers have come out to confess and apologize. And they're telling us everything we said back then. They're telling you guys now, which is a little late for that because look at what has happened to our elections. But again, the fact that they're coming out with these facts to say everything that we were saying was the truth, it helps a lot of people to understand, say, when people like us talk, we talk with authority. And we're coming from a place of legitimacy. We're coming from a place of authenticity because we're not bought and sold for by no useless politician. So that ends chapter 1 of the book. Let me continue with chapter 2. This is beautiful. All right, so chapter 2, guys. Intervention by invitation. So let's see the introduction for chapter 2. The first and second successful coup d'etats of 1967 and 1992. You know, like I said, I don't want to pause reading and spend time breaking down these things, but it's nice for the young folks, our young brothers and sisters, probably in their 30s, in their 20s, that does not know what we're talking about. So let me do this. The reason why I want to do this, the 1967 coup was led by SLPP, military guys that were affiliated with Albert Magai. Because at the time, Albert Magai has been building this entrenchment around him of tribalism and nepotism. So he was gathering all his tribal folks. So you talk about the Inga Normans, the David Lansaners. These were the people that led the coup after Sierra Leone was the first country in Africa to have a successful democratic transition. Sierra Leone was the first in 1967, was the first country in Africa to hold an elections for successful democratic transfer. Sierra Leone was the first. Just like we were the beacon of hope, education, Frabe College, the first across West Africa. You know, things like that, right? So the first coup, SLPP affiliated. Second coup, Marabio and the other boys, SLPP affiliated. Of course, they used Strasser as a Creole guy just to put like a fade over our eyes so we don't see it like it was a Mende thing, but we all know it was a Mende SLPP coup. Marabio himself talk and later on say, I wore kind of green for this me party SLPP, and I mean know how they win the 1996 elections. But when you look at everything in 1992, the whole thing about the coup was SLPP behind it. After we don't crush the Dogbausu, all these nonsense things that they had, all the revolutions that they led. And they forgot that we had a one-party state system because of, again, Albert Magai was the one who introduced the one-party state system in parliament, and Shaka Stevens just enjoyed the whole thing, which is what the SLPP is doing today in Sierra Leone as well. And when another political party comes to power, hey, free for all. You started it, so let's finish it for you. And then waiting for happen again, confusion, fet, ala. It's the cycle continues like it's never gonna end, right? 1967, coup. 1992, coup. SLPP, all behind it. We have to speak these facts, and that is the only way Sierra Leone would move forward. Because you see, what we failed to do, the leaders of the opposition, particularly in APC, sellout idiots. What they failed to do is teach these ISTI to their supporters. But what they don't take the APC people for, it's like the APC people are just a bunch of people away election camp, give them money, give them some rest, give them some t-shirts. That's it. They don't want to empower the people to bring them out of this bondage and this poverty and hardship that they're going through. They want them to be conclaved, into the lack of the civic education. With civic education, a powerful past, even the regular education. Because a lot of these guys, they get all this education. So man be there a security guard in London, he run the go school. So he has no, so you look at the education and the qualifications, there's no bearing, there's no connection. But then run go school, get all this. So, but there is no bearing with what they're doing. So you look at all of these things, you ask yourself, where are these people coming from? That is what is actually happening today in Sierra Leone. But guys, I don't want to explain too much. Let me continue to read. I'm just starting chapter 2 here. I'm going to resist the explanation. I'm going to resist it. The first and second successful coups Uh, the first and second successful coup d'état in 1967 and 1992, respectively, did not involve foreign military intervention, and none was sought. Not so with the coup of 1997. From exile in Guinea, the overthrown democratically elected, we all know how the elections of 1996 was clouded. So Abass Bundu puts her in quote, democratically elected in quote, like I'm doing my finger here, right? Democratically elected, okay. From exile in Guinea, the overthrown democratically elected President Kaba invited the Nigerian autocrat, General Sani Abacha, to intervene militarily to reverse the coup that had toppled him. The two leaders capitalized on the strong wave of international condemnation of the coup, claimed a moral high ground, and launched a military campaign in the name of fighting evil. They believed they could reverse the coup with a minimum of force. Remembering how poorly the Sierra Leone army had been equipped, not to speak of its mangled morale, however, it turned out to be a gross underestimation. Even more surprising was the quiescence of the other ECOWAS member states, which were much more concerned about Nigeria's deployment of military power in the region and about violations of the ECOWAS treaty than about anything else. To the international community, the coup was unacceptable. The democratic legitimacy of President Kaba's government was considered superior to the doctrine of effective control. The same thing, we hear today, even though, we don't know what's going on, but we see the international partners. Everybody, we condemn, all that nonsense. Okay. So even though Kaba had lost effective control of his country, this alone did not invalidate his invitation to General Abacha. It had also helped to suppress international criticism, even though the intervention was being undertaken outside the framework of the United Nations Charter and by a military despot who was himself not free of international opprobrium. Of course, we all know Sani Abacha was a very controversial figure in the Nigerian system. And Sani Abacha was the man searching across banks in Europe, Switzerland, all those places. He had billions of dollars stashed away. One man. Greedy. The question remains, nevertheless, whether Abacha was justified to intervene militarily in a conflict that was purely internal. How different was it from that of ECOWAS in Liberia in 1990? These are some of the key issues addressed in this chapter. So this was just an introduction of chapter 2 by Abass Bundu. Now let's talk about foreign troops in Sierra Leone prior to May 25th, 1997. Before Kaba's invitation, it is significant to remember that a battalion of Nigerian troops was already in Sierra Leone. It had come there in 1991 at the invitation of President Momo. Its mandate was limited to assisting the Sierra Leone army in its campaign against the REF rebels, who at the time were being aided by the NPFL faction in Liberia. This assistance involved the manning of designated key points and key installations in and around Freetown initially, later extended to the provincial cities of Bo and Kenema, in order to relieve the Sierra Leone army of such duties and enable them to go to the front line. So this 1981, Momo bring these troops. It was just to augment, the efforts of the military, so that the military can focus on fighting the rebels, whilst these troops were just holding certain positions to prevent any attacks, right? As the then ECOWAS Executive Secretary, that is Abass Bundu, who's writing this book, he was the Executive Secretary of ECOWAS at the time. I played a part in persuading the Nigerian leader, General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, that such assistance was both necessary and justified. That is the 1991 assistance that Sierra Leone was given. We more requested troops, right? So Abass Bundu is saying he participated. It was very instrumental at the time because he was the secretary of the ECOWAS. So he support the motion and concur with President Joseph Zaidu Momo to say, yes, bring these troops in so that they can help the army. It wasn't an intervention force, it was just to support, right? I also had the rare privilege of twice briefing in camera the National Security Council of the Nigerian military government on the matter. Babangida had apparently encountered some resistance in the council to Nigeria becoming involved in another foreign military adventure while the first one in Liberia was still unsettled. It therefore dispatched General Abacha, then Minister of Defense and Chief of Defense Staff, to Freetown to make an on-the-spot assessment. So Babangida, who was the leader, appointed Abacha to come to Freetown to make an assessment of the situation after Abass Bundu testified at the Nigerian Military Council. I accompanied him on that mission. Abacha was persuaded, and he so reported to the council on his return to Nigeria. As a result, a battalion of Nigerian soldiers left for Sierra Leone. Battalion, probably almost 500, I think, battalion, correct me, African standards. I think it's about 500 men, Before this direct involvement, Nigerians, if communicator was available, of course, it would give me the necessary corrections that I need, because I know I can look it up, but somebody I'm sure would tell us what it is. And welcome, guys, by the way. Mohamed Dafia, Elijah Musa, Patrick Dust. Welcome, my brother. Welcome, all of you guys. All right. Momoa visited Abuja, after which he dispatched the Major Kelly Conte. This is a name that is still playing in the military, by the way. All of these guys they knew what happened. This guy is still playing in the military. I don't know if he's there or fired now, but I think he was under this SLPP government, something defense. He had some major role within the military. You guys would correct me, put in the comments there. President Momo's government. Okay. So Momo visited Abuja, after which he dispatched Major Kelly Conte in a desperate bid to obtain weapons from Nigeria. As stated, the Nigerian troops were restricted to taking defensive roles only. That is, if they attack them only. They were specifically barred from taking part in military offensive, save in self-defense, or with the prior consent of their government. There was no formal defense pact, and the arrangement was based entirely on the mutual friendship of the two leaders. Not until 3 years later, in mid-1994, was it formalized in a memorandum of understanding signed between General Abdul Salami Abubakar, then Chief of Defense Staff, representing the Nigerian government, and Captain Komba Kambo, representing the NPRC junta. Under the memorandum, the role of the Nigerian contingent was enlarged to include military training. For this, a small group of military trainers, under the command of Brigadier Zibri, was added to the contingent. They came to be known as the Nigerian Army Technical Assistance Group. The Nigerian Army Technical Assistance Group. Guys, I hope we're catching these. I hope we're catching it. It's amazing. It's beautiful, man. It's beautiful to know these things. Thus, the initial presence of Nigerian troops in Sierra Leone was as a result of the personal friendship between Babangida and Momo. So when Momo was toppled by the NPRC, he could easily have requested military intervention from his friend in Nigeria. He did not. Apprehensive that such intervention might have resulted in unnecessary loss of civilian life and property. So Momo had the same. He could have called Babangida at the time in Nigeria. Because remember, within that period, across West Africa, it was all military leadership. That was why Sheikh Stevens actually handed power to a military guy, because again, just to maintain the status quo around the sub-region at that point. All military. So Momo could have asked Babangida for support. They would have removed, this Marabio would not have been around anymore. These people destroying the country like Marabio can destroy a country. So not before they again. If Momo would have taken advantage of the friendship that he had with Babangida to remove the NPRC at the time. But because Momo Fritzi or was concerned about the fact that it would be unnecessary loss of lives, he said no. So it did not. It did not. Apprehensive that such intervention might have resulted in unnecessary loss of civilian life and property. Thus, even against his own best interest, Momo clearly displayed a depth of concern for human security. Excuse me. Both by design and by operation. The Nigerian army in Sierra Leone, NATAG, was not part of ECOMOG, though under the ultimate command of its field commander. ECOMOG was a multilateral peacekeeping contingent established in 1990 solely for the Liberian conflict. On the other hand, NATAG was in Sierra Leone purely on a bilateral basis. The fact that it was put under the command of the ECOMOG field commander did not make them one. It was purely fortuitous that the field commander was Nigerian and was also the most senior Nigerian military officer in the vicinity. So the Nigerian forces in Sierra Leone should not be confused with ECOMOG in Liberia. Different regimes had governed their operations. For example, whereas ECOMOG in Sierra Leone was accountable to ECOWAS through the executive secretary, the Nigerian troops in Sierra Leone were not. This separateness was subsequently confirmed by the status of the forces agreement, SOFA, between Nigeria and Sierra Leone, signed on March 7, 1997. SOFA makes it clear that the preoccupation of the signatories was with the defense of Sierra Leone against external aggression and not with the internal armed conflict in the country. Article 2 of SOFA reads, "The government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria shall make available the military and security assistance of the Nigerian Forces Assistance Group, NIFAG, for the sustenance of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Republic of Sierra Leone." At the same time SOFA was signed, fresh hostilities had been broken out. Fresh hostilities had just broken out between the Sierra Leone Army and the RAF in breach of the ceasefire under the Abidjan Peace Accord. There was thus ample justification, if one were needed, for including unambiguous clauses in SOFA, the signed treaty, right, to permit Nigerian forces in Sierra Leone to take part in military operations against the RAF, quite apart from their right to self-defense.